Okay, we're going to be in 1 John chapter 3 this evening. And we'll give folks a little bit of time to join us. Sherry says hello. Hello, Sherry. Robin says she's here. Hi, Robin. And that's a minute and a half there, so we'll go ahead and get started. 1 John chapter 3, verses 1 through 3. For those of us who were here, we will sound somewhat familiar. See how great a love the Father has bestowed on us, that we should be called children of God. And such we are. For this reason the world does not know us, because it did not know him. Beloved, now we are children of God, and it has not appeared as yet what we will be. We know that when he appears, we will be like him, because we will see him just as he is. And everyone who has this hope fixed on him purifies himself, just as he is pure. Okay, what do we think about that?
Be called God's children. If we really stop and think about that, it's I can't think of, I guess, the words I want to use, but it would be a great honor to be listed as one of God's children. And Paul, or John right here makes that point, which is very powerful if you think about it.
Okay. So it's a status conferred by God that you are his child. I had, this is going way back, when I was practicing law in Arkansas, I needed to get some CLE credits, continuing legal education credits. And I was really short on money, but I had to get some. And there was an attorney in a town not far from where my mom grew up that was hosting a webinar. It wasn't a webinar, it was a videotape at the time. I was at a webinar, but it was kind of like that. It was a videotape that if we all signed in and watched it, we got CLE credits for it. And I called him up and he said, come on down and watch it with us. And went down there. And I told him my mom grew up in that area and my name of my grandfather and grandmother. And he had known my grandfather back in the day. And I got to say, I don't know if they had interaction or if it was pleasant or unpleasant. I don't know anything about that. But he didn't watch hardly any of that video. He just kept looking over at me and shaking his head. And that's Oscar Goodson's grandson. I don't know if it was good or bad or what. With my grandfather, it could have been a good experience. It might have been a not so good experience. He was a good man, but he was kind of a hard man. So I don't know. I didn't get any details out of it. But maybe it was just a blast from the past, a name he hadn't heard in a long time. So that's probably the most likely scenario. So, but to be Oscar Goodson's grandson, I think it made him glad I was there. It made him glad I called him up and came by and watched that video with him. So to be who we are, to be the children of God. My dad would used to tell us when we go off to school, remember whose you are. And I don't know if he meant his kids or the children of God. And I think it was maybe a little bit of both. And it should be, in a sense, a source of, again, confidence. The chapter 2 leaves off with the idea of confidence in the approaching of God and the approaching of our eternity with God. And then picking up here, being in the confidence that we should have as we go off into ministry, as we go off into the world, as we deal daily with believers and non-believers, that we are the children of God. And that is a very affirming thought. It's kind of a challenging thought too, though, isn't it? And when you're the child of a great man, I mean, how many of us have known people that we thought were really great guys or whatever, great ladies, and you hold, especially when it's a man and his son, kind of hold that son up to the standard of the father a little bit, don't you? And that's kind of tough, isn't it? And that's kind of the challenge that we have. And some of the old translations, I believe, are sung tonight that use this verse was the sons of God, and the more contemporary and I think accurate translation is children. They would use the male gender in Greek when it was unknown, or to refer to both simultaneously in one. Instead of saying we are the sons and daughters of God, they would say we're the children of God, but they would say just sons. And at the same time, it reflects perhaps the favored status that the son would enjoy in most cultures at that time, and probably until very recently, and maybe even continuing now. And I don't say that to exclude women at all. What I'm saying is, women, you too have that favored status. That both translations, I think there's room for both of them in that way, that convey this idea that we are the favored children of God, and our gender doesn't really matter. But in their culture, it did matter a lot more, and it was better to be a son than a daughter, and we are those children of God that are favored, whereas really all humanity bears His image. He is the source of all human life, of all life, but certainly the source of all life, and that makes Him the Father of all things, the Father of all people, and the Father of all creation. So, but He gave humanity His image, and He gave all humans His image, and in a sense, all of our fellow humans are our brothers and sisters. He is their creator. He is their father. And they don't call Him Father. They don't consider Him Father, not all humans. So we are His children and His favorite children. And that is something that is misunderstood a lot these days, what it means to be favored by God. What do you think it means to have God's favor?
Well, just
I'm
in
Indy.
a
Hi,
practical
Marlene.
sense, you'd rather have His favor than His disfavor.
Okay. And then how is that manifested, though, in our lives today?
Well, that is also on us, that realizing that we are favored of God, that we should, our lives should reflect that. And that's a challenge for us as Christians, that we should reflect that in our daily lives to show that we are God's children.
Okay. It's manifested and it's reflected. And how so? What do you normally think of when you say you are in God's favor? When you think about biblical characters.
Normally think is God's going to take care of
Blessings. Yeah.
Okay, blessings. What kind of blessings?
Blessings, right?
Okay, salvation, but what kind of blessings?
Well, He tells us not to worry about what we have to eat or drink, and He'll take care of it
Okay,
for us. I mean,
provisions.
that's a blessing. Don't worry about tomorrow, for the day has no trouble its own, which is a different deal. But still in all, we can go to Him for comfort, we can go to Him for health, we can go to Him for others, for other people's problems. So we have loss for the word I want to use, but we have an opportunity and a person or a thing, no, that's the wrong word. But God, we can go to him for a multitude of needs that we have, and he's willing to supply.
Okay. Let me ask it this way. What biblical characters do you think of as being favored by God?
Well, there's quite a few of them, Abraham, Isaac,
Okay.
um,
Patriarchs?
all the patriarchs, David. In a sense, Paul or Saul was favored by God. He was chosen, I think, to go to the Gentiles.
Yes,
It
ma'am.
makes me think of this first few verses of the second chapter, that we can go to him, to Christ, for forgiveness and atonement if we fall.
Okay.
Of course, because he mentions in there about being pure, that we know that as a human, we not going to make the grade all the time.
Okay. Well, how would you say the world views, if they thought about being favored by God, what do you think the world thinks of in terms of being favored by God?
I think they would think that we were
Well, what I heard you ask was that and now I can't say it, but the profitability gospel, or what?
Prosperity.
Prosperity gospel, yeah. If you're favored by God, God's gonna bless you with riches and health and all of this kind of stuff. That would be more of could be more of what the world would think of it. But now, like what Mark was saying, if we were to, our claim that as Christians we are favored by God, they would take the question our attitude, I guess, like Mark was.
Okay. It sounds a little bit, not maybe even a little bit, a lot, perhaps, like arrogance, that we are above them. We think of ourselves as being like the teacher's pet, kind of. If you've ever been the teacher's pet in school, Mark was never the teacher. It's hard to be the teacher's pet when you're getting sent out of the classroom all the time.
Yes.
A teacher's test. Well, and there's also, I don't know what you call the one the teacher really can't stand, but so
Wasn't that bad.
okay, there's sometimes teachers take a really strong disliking, and I'm not saying Sherry would ever do that because she's not that kind of teacher, but there were a couple of times when I was going through school that the teacher really liked me, and there were a few teachers that didn't care for me at all, and I probably earned the disfavored status, but not so much the favored status. That was just for one reason or another they took a shine to me. But when we say and we talk about being favored, and it's not just how the world presents it, it is to a large extent how many people of faith, many people who profess to be Christians, when their new car becomes into their possession, when they get a raise at work, or when they advance in their career, or some other material blessing, or some other. And the thing is, as you all have said, we can, particularly Mark has said, that we can rely upon God's favor to have what we need. Jesus has assured us that God knows what we need, and he will provide what we need. But when we talk about favor in terms of purely material gifts, it's manifested in how much money we have, and how nice our private jets are. Some of our private jets here, these people, are not that great, really. Some of y'all's private jets are just okay. Not as nice as my private jet. So when you look at the expressions of, and when you think about favor in that regard, it is really a slap to the face of the people that don't have the nicer things in life, and maybe do struggle to have even the very necessities of life, as a character in a movie saying, the bare necessities of life. And that's something we need to talk about, I think, a little bit, is this expression. What does it mean to be favored by God? And I think in this regard, it's not going to be in a way the world looks at us and envies us. You know, if we go to our enemies, you know, because in our brand new Escalade with the spinning wheels that keep rolling around after you come to a stop and all that, and you got everything all, you know, custom made clothing and lots of expensive jewelry, and you go there with that to show them God's favor upon you. They probably won't like you for that. If you show up, you know, on foot, worn out shoes, old clothes, no jewelry, you know, just simple and plain and all of that, they probably won't like that either. You know, the favor that is expressed to God, expressed from God to us, is not necessarily seen in material possessions. We have the assurances that we will get what we need, but ultimately, what we are given the assurance of, the favor, is the grace to endure whatever our circumstances are, whether we have a lot. There are Christian people that own private jets, and I know a lot of people that would say you can't be a good Christian and own a private jet. Well, I mean, I'd like to try it, I guess. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I really hate flying commercial. I mean, that's right. I just would like not to have to go through the main airports and everything. It doesn't have to be a fancy private jet, just mine. Maybe I'm just looking for a favored flying status or something like that. But the favor that is shown is this opportunity, the grace God gives us is to believe in him and to follow his son. And if you look at the life Jesus lived, he had what he needed during his earthly life. It came his way. He didn't have to turn the rocks into bread to eat. And God provided for him. God took care of him. At the same time, it was a life of sacrifice, a life of blessing others, a life of feeding others, and a life that led to brutality, reception of brutality. And the favor that Tammy got to, the salvation that we have, is not really an expression of favor most of the world wants anyway, because they don't want what goes along with it. Everybody would like to be saved the moment they're, I guess we used the example a couple weeks ago on Sunday morning, you're about to get run over by a truck. We'd all like to have somebody pull us out from in front of that truck. Okay, now that you've been pulled out from in front of that truck, now what? I get to go doing whatever put me in front of that truck to begin with? Or does something change about the fact that you're now safe, that you've now been saved? And that's kind of where the rubber meets the road. That's the difference. And that's why, even though we are from the Father, the one who created all humanity, the one in whose image all humans are created, and they bear that image, they still don't know us. Because while God is ultimately truly their Father, they have rejected that relationship, and they have sought the things that a father provides as children from other sources. And they give credit to those other sources. And when I was working at the golf course in Auburn, we hosted a lot of corporate events. Big companies would come out and rent the course for a day, and all the golf carts and all that stuff. And I don't know how much it cost. I think some of it was purely charitable. They were raising money for charities, and other things were. So the cost to the golf course would probably be a little bit variable. But one of them, I can't remember, was one of those big tech companies. I don't think it was Microsoft. I think it was one of the other ones there in the Seattle area. And all these guys came out to play golf at a pretty nice course, expensive course and all of that. And boy, they all sang the praises of their employer. They talked about how wonderful their company that they worked for was. And I guess that's nice to be grateful for a nice gift and all of that. But if you see the source of your blessing in life as Microsoft or Nintendo or Oracle or whatever software company, Tesla, or whatever it is out there. That's how long ago this was. Now nobody had even heard of Elon Musk back then. So you look at all of that as your source of your blessing, then that's your Father. That really is your God. If you see past that and you see that whoever is blessing you is simply a vessel that God is using to pour out a blessing upon you, then you can receive the blessing from an intermediary, but still honor the Father who is really the source of that blessing. Just as when you work for that intermediary, you don't look at him and say, I'm working for Elon Musk. You say, I'm rendering my service as to the Lord. Hi, Vicki. Hi, Neil. So, this favored status is really something that we have and that we value and that we treasure. But it's something that maybe the rest of the world won't value and maybe even mocks us over. Not only do they reject our claims of being favored, they're like, well, if that's favored, I don't want to be like you. And that's, to some extent, the experiences, the lifestyle of these false teachers who are coming in. But it's also here, the first few chapters, John is talking about the world. He is talking about the world in the sense of not all creation, not the cosmos, not heavens and space and other planets and all that stuff. He's talking about our fellow humans, those who have not accepted Jesus as their Lord and Savior yet, for whatever reason. The way of the cross, as Paul says, is foolishness to those who are lost. People make fun of our faith and make fun of our belief system. It doesn't make sense to them, so they make fun of it. And everybody does that. When you see something you don't understand, your first reaction may be to make fun of it. And why are they doing that? Why do all those limeys drive on the wrong side of the road over there in England? Don't they know which side of the road they're supposed to drive on? Well, I've been to a place, and I'll let you guess where it is. I've been to a place where they drive with the steering wheel like we have it, but they drive on the side of the road the Brits drive on. So your steering wheel is on the side of the shoulder of the road, not the center of the road. And if you can figure out where that's at and you go there, be careful. That compromises your visibility when you're trying to pass somebody a little bit there. You need a co-pilot, I guess. Maybe that's the whole means. Nobody drives alone. You drive with a co-pilot. But it's something we don't understand. It's something we don't do. It's something we don't practice. So our inclination may be to mock it, to deride it. And yet it is a sign that we are truly the children of God. And it should be reflected in how we live. It should. Our favored status should be reflected not in how we live in terms of we do have a private jet, but that we try to purify ourselves, that we try to remove the sinful things of our lives. We're not going to do it perfectly. We're not going to do it absolutely. We don't really get rid of our sin at all. We certainly don't get rid of the guilt of our sin on our own. We need Jesus for that. He takes away the guilt of our sin. But we do not covet. Again, if we're pulled out from in front of that truck, we're not going to go find the next street that we can stand out and hope we get hit by another truck. We start maybe looking for other people who are standing out where they might get hit by a truck. I'll get the right preposition eventually. So this favored status, it's very important. It's something we desire and something we really need. We need to trust God, but it's not an easy life. It's not easy to trust in God for your basic provisions. It's very difficult. How many people in the world, how many Christians in the world wake up every morning and they don't know where their next meal is coming from? They've been told. It's not just true. When we get up and we offer our prayers and we're thankful for all of our many blessings, and we're so thankful that we have a big meal at Thanksgiving, we're thankful for, that's true. But the message of the gospel is for everyone. The message of the gospel is for that lady in a drought and famine-stricken zone who can't feed her kids, who wakes up in the morning and she's hungry and her kids are hungry and there's no way, no visible means that this food's going to come to her. You know, the message of the gospel is just as true for her. Now, if God was intending for us to feed her and we haven't, then we may have to answer for that. That's on us, perhaps. But the messages of that is very much true for her too. She is more valuable than many sparrows, just like we are. And God knows about her plight. And that doesn't make it easier. That doesn't help us with the world. That the world says, well, if your God is so powerful and so loving, why is this woman starving to death? And why are you hauling your carcass down to the Chinese buffet to see how much you can jam into it? You know, these are tough questions, and our brokenness, our flaws, our shortcomings, and the brokenness of the world still impact people's lives. But we are favored, and we're favored with the hope that we have in Jesus Christ, and we try to be more like him. And hopefully one day there won't be any women waking up in the world anywhere hungry themselves and wondering how they're going to feed their kids. What a great day that would be. And we're a long way from that, I think. But hopefully it'll happen one day. We won't accomplish it, but God may accomplish it. God will ultimately bring about his will on earth as it is in heaven. It should be our will, our hope that it is through us. Verses 4 through 10.
Before you go there,
Yes, sir.
There's a footnote here about the hope, and over the years we've kind of talked about what we call the hope, and everyone who has this hope in him purifies himself. And the footnote here, again, I know it's not inspired, but it's not a mere wish, but an unshakable confidence concerning the future. We hope that it's going to rain pretty soon, and because we need the rain here. But and I guess you could still say that we have a hope that it's going to rain, and we're sure that it's going to rain someday. But but there's that hope. It's important to us, and it's not just I'm hoping for a bicycle for Christmas hope. It's an assurance that we have.
It's an assurance. It's also a motivation. It is. If you're a farmer waiting for the rain to plant, you don't wait for the rain to go buy the seed. To go get your equipment ready to go. If it's a tractor or if it's your mule or whatever. It's a hope that maybe keeps you from eating the last corn you have in the bags because that's your seed corn. You're hoping to plant. You're waiting on that rain. So it is confidence, but it's also, I would say, what John is really going on here is this is going to drive the way you live. And in some sense, that's confidence, but in another sense, it is motivation. It is why we do what we do to a world that does not appreciate it. Where we'll be made fun of on talk shows and, all of that. And we have other people who bear our name, in a sense, out there heaping the shame on us because of how they live. And we bring some of the shame on ourselves from time to time. But we are still God's children, and we are following him and following him as Christ lived and modeled godly living for us. And in contrast, we see the false teachers, and we talked about this a little bit, but this idea that what happens physically doesn't matter because the body is doomed. It is the spirit that will live on. And therefore, what we do in the body doesn't matter. It only matters our spirit is saved anyway, so that's all that matters. And that is not too far afield from our basic teaching of eternity, is it? I mean, we don't talk about the bodily resurrection of the dead very often. In large part because there's a lot of people, a lot of great followers of God, people of God and followers of Jesus Christ, who have no bodily remains discernible on the planet anymore. After a while, even your bones turn into dust. Some of them got ate by sharks, whatever. Burned up in fires. People were cremated. What about the bodily resurrection? Well, God will bodily resurrect. We have this message of bodily resurrection, and I'm not saying that to dissuade people from cremation or anything like that, because I believe God can bring our bodies out of whatever it is. He gave us our bodies to begin with. He can give us our bodies back. And exactly what that looks like, and am I going to have the body I'm resurrected in when I was 20, or the body I died in when I was 80? I mean, maybe you're just kind of hoping for something in the middle. I don't know, but that is the significance. That's one of the things that can be lost when we think about Jesus being resurrected and us being resurrected in his likeness. The body of Jesus Christ was resurrected. It wasn't just his spirit. He was a physical being again after the resurrection. Here's my wounds. Touch them. I'm here. Here, I'll eat some fish. I'll cook some breakfast for you. And that's a big, I think, correction to our general notion of the eternity which is just our spirit. Our body, our spirit will leave this body, and we were going to be up there in heaven, spiritual sense, and it's going to be so different. I think in some ways that's accurate. In other ways, the bodily resurrection is real. So therefore, what we do in our bodies is relevant. It makes a difference. So let's kind of close with those verses, and we'll talk about them a little bit more. Verses 4 through 10. Everyone who practices sin also practices lawlessness, and sin is lawlessness. You know that he appeared in order to take away sins, and in him there is no sin. No one who abides in him sins. No one who sins has seen him or knows him. Little children, make sure no one deceives you. The one who practices righteousness is righteous, just as he is righteous. The one who practices sin is of the devil, for the devil has sinned from the beginning. The Son of God appeared for this purpose, to destroy the works of the devil. No one who is born of God practices sin, because his seed abides in him, and he cannot sin, because he is born of God. By this, the children of God and the children of the devil are obvious. Anyone who does not practice righteousness is not of God, nor the one who does not love his brother. Okay, we're definitely going to have to come back to this next week, but just in closing, what thoughts are on that passage? Marlene says she votes to come back at the age of 20. I sure will. That may have been the age when Bruce saw her first. I don't know. 20 used to be an old maid, huh? The ladies, if you lived to be 20 and you weren't married, something must be wrong. But we have a little more enlightened view on that now, I think. That's good. So some pretty tough stuff in these verses as we close. It's something to think about maybe for next week with this idea, this notion of how inconsistent sin is with the life of someone following Jesus Christ, because Christ was without sin, in bodily form without sin. And that's one of the absolutely indispensable aspects of his life we can't really negotiate. A lot of people would say he was a good guy, but he must have had some sins. And, he's a human being, so he must have sinned. And human beings sin. God doesn't sin. He's a human being who is also God. And these are, again, concepts we can't really explain in human terms necessarily. We believe in faith. But if we're going to follow Jesus, if we're going to be his disciples, as we are the children of God, our lives should reflect that. And at the very least, to the extent they don't, when our lives do not reflect the sinless nature of Jesus Christ, it makes our work a lot harder, doesn't it? It would be like coming, if I was your doctor and you came in to see me and I said, you need to drop a few pounds. You look at me and think, well, physician, heal yourself. It'd be like going to your pulmonologist and he's smoking an unfiltered Marlboro. I'm saying, you need to quit smoking. You may need to quit smoking. You may need to drop a few pounds. But when you hear that from someone whose own message isn't exactly consistent, then they lose credibility and they're working uphill. It's really hard to make those points when you are not living it yourself, when you do not embody the standard you're trying to call others to live. So the more consistent we are with it, the probably the more receptive we'll find in our audience, up to a point. But still, we aren't perfect. We can always come in humility. Humility is never a bad posture for a Christian. Okay. I did. Ed, will you lead us in a closing prayer, please, sir?